Indian removal, as the policy was and is still known. Indian removal is the subject of this book, though I do not use either word except in historical context. Indian is for good reason a designation of pride for many Native people in the United States today. But when used to describe the diverse individuals and communities who were expelled from their homelands in the 19th century, its fanciful and specious associations distort our understanding of the past. Indians were savage and primitive, or noble and in touch with nature. They were stoic, brave, cowardly, untrustworthy, honorable, and doomed. The men were not husbands and fathers, but warriors. The women, squaws, maidens, or burden-bearers. Political leaders were chiefs, and communities or nations were tribes. Indians were, in short, different from other people. The label conjures up so many stereotypes that it clouds the mind, making it impossible to see the past clearly. In the context of American history, it evokes tragedy and inevitability, creating a dense fog that obscures the choices that U.S. politicians and their constituents made in the early years of the Republic. Removal is equally unfitting for a story about the state-sponsored expulsion of 80,000 people. It is a soft word, said the Massachusetts Representative Edward Everett in a debate on the floor of the House in 1830, and words are delusive. Then and now it conveys no sense of coercion or violence. The phrase Indian removal, coined by proponents of the policy, has all of the problems of its two constituent terms and possesses an additional fault. In the 19th century, people removed themselves to new locales or were removed for committing crimes. Indian removal, however, was an unusual construction that left unstated who was removing whom. Were Indians doing it to themselves? The phrase is artfully vague. There are other ways of describing what the United States did to indigenous people in the 1830s. Human rights activists, writing about events in the 21st century, speak of forced migration, but I am not alone in finding the phrase too distant from events on the ground. Ethnic cleansing, a term of propaganda that became widely used during the Bosnian War in the 1990s, is rightly criticized for being nebulous and even for obscuring violence. Genocide elevates a single question above all others. Does the event fit the definition of the crime, as defined by the 1948 United Nations Convention on Genocide? European colonists and their descendants undeniably acted with genocidal intent at certain times and places, but how often and how extensively is a matter of debate. My focus lies elsewhere. I use three other words to describe U.S. policy in the 1830s. One is deportation. Deportation is conducted by states, and the term, therefore, captures the administrative and bureaucratic process that underpinned the federal government's expulsion of Native peoples. Since a nation can only deport people who are on its soil, beyond its borders it must resort to diplomacy or force of arms. Deportation also points to the U.S. assault on indigenous sovereignty in the 1830s, when the federal government and several states extended their jurisdiction and authority over lands not belonging to them. To evoke the underlying violence of the act, I also refer to the uprooting of Native Americans as an expulsion. The word has the advantage of being historically accurate, for it was used at the time by the policy's opponents and victims. When appropriate, I use a third term, borrowed from the perpetrators themselves, who on certain occasions referred to their goal as one of extermination. I was inspired to tackle this project when I inherited a cache of letters from my grandfather, who escaped from Hungary to Cleveland, Ohio, in December 1937. He corresponded with his parents and sibling in Sátoraljaújhely in northeastern Hungary until 1944, when Nazis deported them to Auschwitz. Reading through the letters, I began to reconsider the deportation that occurred a little over a century earlier near my current home in Athens, Georgia. Some of the towns